Well, I want to hear all about your workshops. You know that we've been off for a couple of months. We're starting to get back into it, and you had opted into kind of a long-term workshop. Tell the folks about that.
Yeah, I had all of March has been with the Smoke Long Fitness. They had a March Micro Madness Marathon. I'm sorry, I'm not remembering the title very well, but I have never in my life done a workshop outside of, classes way back in college. So I was really excited to try this workshop for a couple different reasons. Number one, because it was affordable, and I was really kind of gobsmacked because as an actor in New York City, there are workshops, there are things, and those tend to be very, very expensive. One of the reasons I don't do improv, something that I very, very much love, is because here in New York City, you're going to pay through the nose to take improv workshops. But the Smoke Long was very affordable. It's a fantastic literary magazine. The folks that run it are wonderful. And I really wanted to overcome my fear of being in a workshop environment for a couple of different reasons. Number one, it was a daily writing task for 24 days. Every ninth day, you started in a new group. So there were 8 prompts in one group, and then you'd get put into another group for 8 prompts or 8 days, and then a third group. So I had 3 different groups of people, and it was really, really great experience. I did a quick count. Obviously, if you have 24 prompts, you're like, oh, you must have 24 pieces. But the 8th day of each octet, as they called it, was a day where you picked one of the pieces you had worked on the previous week and edited it and resubmitted it for folks to comment on. So it was a really, really great thing. I got about 22 pieces, and I feel like maybe 5 or 6 are, to me, in my opinion, are very strong for me to go back to and say, I can make something out of this. And the rest of it, hey, sometimes the muse doesn't hit you like you want it to, but it was a really great experience. And one of the reasons that I wanted to do it was because I wanted to challenge myself. And I know that seems like a very basic cliched thing to do, but we've talked on this show a lot about my work and how stressful it is for me. And I kind of really threw myself into the fire by having one of my biggest clients at the same time as the Smoke Long Fitness started. And it really, really went well. I found a really great nook for me to write in, which is about 6 a.m., 1.5 cups of coffee in. And I could go on for the entirety of this entire episode talking about how many great things are about it, but I'll start with that, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, I'm good with sitting back and learning from your journey. That would be fine with me. The only thing I did 2 things. One of them I can't talk about, but I did actually write a narrative of a game that I'm helping to design, and the folks who needed to review it said it was fantastic. So I was really, really happy that they are pleased.
Hey.
The other thing is I started working with one of our first clients. We had talked about kicking off those workshops that we would do. And, I'm really excited to be part of someone's book coaching journey. And, I'm a little sheepish because I've never written a book. So how can you coach someone how to write a book if you've never written a book? Well, that's a really good question. I don't have a good answer. So I was really excited to help this gentleman, kind of work through his book. And that's a long-term process. Like we're involved in that, probably meeting once a month and, helping him plot it out and, do the revisions and whatnot. So I'm very happy to be contributing to that. But I think that the thing that you're doing is much more relevant to what our listeners are really into right now, which is, what did you get out of that experience? So I'm really excited to hear what you got out of those individual writing prompts. I remember you were sending me a bunch of stuff, and I was very pleased to be receiving the avalanche of, partial stories or story openings. 1 or 2 of them were outstanding, and I can't remember what they were, but I just remember replying back to you like, this is it. Like, this is great. So you're approaching, in that process, you're approaching the work like a professional, where you go in every day and you go to work, and 6 a.m., 1.5 cups of coffee's in. That's where you know that you're in that sweet spot. That flow state is probably easiest to tap into right there. So coming out of this workshop, do you think you're going to carry that forward? Do you think you're going to be able to keep doing that?
You said about 5 things in that where I just want to, I'm like so excited to talk about each one and could at length. I'm
Please
so excited
do.
about this.
Please do. Let's do it.
Yeah. Number one, I really love the fact that you're helping someone coach, because I think one of the things that Smokelong did for me is I had deadlines. I had, there was this sort of pressure isn't the word, but it's sort of like you're meeting with someone maybe once a month to talk about novels, to talk about their novel. And so it sort of feels like, oh, I've got homework to do. I don't want to let anybody down. Plus, you're getting this opportunity with these daily prompts to share them with a group of people. And I don't know how many people were in each group, but it becomes this sort of thing of, wow, I'm excited to share this with folks to see where I'm at, like see how things are going, see what people think. And it was really, really fantastic. I was in groups with people who had been published in lit mags that I drool and obsess over. I'm talking about Wigleaf, X-Ray, and some of these lit mags that are absolutely fantastic, Split Lip. And I didn't know that when I first met these folks, virtually in the group. I just sort of putting stuff up. And then you sort of like, oh, this person is writing some amazing stuff when you're trying to critique, which is a whole other thing. But, you read that somebody who just gave you some very insightful or helpful comments on the piece that you're sharing, has the kind of writing resume that you want to attain. You're like, oh my gosh, this person is giving me such great advice. And there's someone who has work that you admire, that you look up to, that is in the kind of lit mags that you want. So it was really nice to have that sort of homework quality of, I need to do the work today. And it also motivated me because I wanted to make something that people would like. And I know that that's probably not the best. I'm trying to find my voice and et cetera, et cetera. But like, you're just sort of like, oh, all right. Oh, you know what? I think this one's going to go well. Maybe this one will go well. Or, I have enough self-awareness to be like, you know what? This one needs its shoelaces tied. This one needs a lot of work, but hey, I got to go to,
Yeah.
People are just sort of like, hey, I got to go to work, or hey, I didn't feel too well. People might be out for a couple days, but it was a really, really supportive culture. The entire workshop was just run so well and so fun that I was not excited about the piece that I had written some days, but I didn't dread posting it because other people were doing the same thing. It really, a long time ago, as an actor in New York City, I got the opportunity to sit behind the audition table for a show that I was in. I had been cast in it, and they were like, we need to audition for a couple other roles. Why don't you sit behind the desk? And it just sort of opens your eyes to the fact that everyone is going through the same stuff you are. Different ways, different levels, different ways that they're taking and things like that. But it just really made me feel like, oh, I'm sitting here worried about what I'm doing. And there are people who are just trying their best like I am. And it really, really, really helped to demystify my own expectations and thoughts about other writers. Like, I know this is going to be stupid for a 51-year-old to say, but like, I thought, I had this silly idea that anybody that's in Wigleaf or in any of these great, is going to just have something that comes out brilliant and beautiful the first time. And you know what Smokelong taught me? They do. Yeah, it does. Yeah, the writers that are in, Wigleaf, they'll be like, I wrote this morning. And you're like, oh, I hate you. But they share the same fears, or the same concerns. And I think that some of those writers have been doing it so much longer that their experience level, it's a difference in experience level, not in ability. And I Loved it. I absolutely loved it. And the other thing that I really wanted to get out of this was to be more confident in giving feedback, because as we've talked about before, I'm not someone that knows, the grammatical rules or, the sort of technical terminology of teaching a class on writing, for example. I'm just like, hey man, go with what you know, do with what you want. I that sounds good to me. Do you like the way that it goes? Which is also something I want to touch upon, but like, it really helped me see how other people gave feedback to know that, oh, okay, we can say things like, I really wasn't feeling this. You're such a good person at giving me feedback. We've developed that relationship over 30 years. But here's someone that I've been in a group with for 3 days. And it's like, ooh, you know what? I think that their second paragraph is where this should begin. It's a really good start, but oh gosh, I don't want to make them feel bad. And then you go on and you find out this, a couple other people are like, hey, I think that you're catching fire here in that second paragraph. Maybe that's where it begins. So you can be very open and very honest. No one in the entire month wrote anything that seemed like it was just poo-pooing or just being a jerk for a jerk's sake.
Yeah.
It was an entirely supportive community, and that's what felt really great about it. And I'm so happy that I did it.
That's great. No, and I've encouraged you frequently to be very candid, not brutal in your honesty, but very candid, because you have, a really good instinct for when things work and when they don't. And if you're able to spot it, but you don't share it, it's actually a disservice to the person who asked you to read the work, because you're like, ooh, there's a problem spot, but I'm going to hang on to that because I don't want them to feel bad. And then they just go on la-di-da as if the thing is fine. And somebody else is going to run into that pothole. You know that. So like sharing that with them, or let's say with me. So when I give you the next story and you see a pothole, I want you to tell me about it, because I really need to fix those potholes. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a really great experience. So now that the workshop is over, they do have contests for folks to enter with pieces that they've started in this workshop. So I'm very excited. I've got 2 pieces that I'm one piece that I'm like, this is it. I'm going to send this in. Another piece, and that one's going to be for their 400 word contest. I have another piece that I'm working on. I was doing it just before we got on today for 250 words. And then there's another contest for 100 word stories. So it's really nice. And they've got so many different workshops that they do. And they had a couple online workshops with some really, really great people to help motivate and give you ideas and talk about how they work through their process. So yeah, I can't think of anything bad to say about it. Last season we were talking about me maybe thinking about trying to get into longer works. I think I'm going to include collections in that instead of, a longer work like the novel that I wrote 2 seasons ago and haven't even reread.
Right.
But this really is, I feel like, a nice turning point in my writing career, because the things I'm writing in this workshop and the feedback that I've gotten and some of the insights that some writers that I really were blown out of the water by, those things, I look at the stuff that I was writing just before I took this workshop and I'm like, ugh, what was I doing? Like, I feel like I could go back to that stuff with a more clear eye. So have I arrived? No. Have I become a master writer? Absolutely not. But it was a clear, decisive step forward for me to find my own voice in writing. And that's something that I've been wanting since, I graduated in college, because I really haven't had that. And it's been really great.
That is great. One thing that I try to focus on around feedback is when you're coaching a kinesthetic activity. Let's say I'm trying to teach someone how to swing a golf club or throw a football. There's a lot of moving parts to that, and there's a lot of places where it can go wrong. If you try to correct every part of that that's wrong all at once, then you end up just confusing the person trying to do the activity. And so the prevailing wisdom is fix one thing every time you kind of come up to coach. And so, in throwing a football, you want to allow it to come off your fingers, and you actually spin the ball. And that's how you get the rotation, is kind of with your fingertips. And so there's a certain way to do that. There's a certain way to hold the football. There's a certain place you should put it in the rotation. There's a certain place where you should kind of release it, et cetera, depending on whether you want it to go high and far or kind of low and slow, whatever. So all of this is just to say, for our writing, if you go back to those old pieces, there's going to be stuff that can get better. And it may even be stuff that other people had mentioned to you, but it doesn't matter, because you probably went back and focused on the one thing that you felt like you could improve. And that, I think, is a very commendable way to approach it. That's what I try to do, which is why I think it can be so frustrating, because every time I come back to a work that I know is in progress, I see something else that can be improved. And sometimes it's so small that I'm like, I'm just going to send it out and we'll see. And I've published stories that could have been improved further, but I said, this is good enough for now. Let's just go with it. So I think that's really, really important to recognize, is that we're not striving for perfection. We're just trying to get our stories to where they convey the emotion and the thought that we want to convey to the reader. And once we've achieved that, we're good. We move on to the next one, but not trying to fix everything that's wrong with it all at once. It's an iterative process. So that's good.
That's the thing. It's really given me a couple more tools. And again, and I can't stress this enough, not only reading other people's works, but seeing how other people comment on works was just such a wonderful way to see the way that people evaluated other work. And it was very, very helpful, because, someone might say, I think this just needs tightening up, something like that. You would see that a lot, like, oh, what a wonderful piece, but I think it just needs a little tightening up. But there were other folks who would talk about, like, things that I sort of kind of would feel, but never really knew how to put words to. So I highly suggest anybody that is like us, that just wants to be better, regardless of where they are in that process. I think that it's very important to get involved in something like this with a lot of other people, because it's really going to put your feet to the fire. It's really going to say, hey, one of the things that this did for me was, like, it in kind of a depressing way, it would be like I would come up with a piece and then I'd say, oh, this is really great. I really love it. I'd upload it to Smokelong. Folks would give commentary on it. Folks would say nice things about it. Things would, they would think where it needed a little help. But it was just one of those things of, man, if I didn't have to go to work, I could have stayed here and been in this flow state, but I gotta go to work. And that was one of the disappointing things. But something else that's happened, because, we like to talk about, we got to get real for a second here about it. One of the things that I also am having a problem with now that the workshop is over is, earlier today, it's very easy. It's like, hey, I got 22 new pieces to work with. But those pieces that I felt the strongest about, that I feel the strongest about, are ones that got some good commentary, that got some good feedback. Some folks would be like, hey, this is great as it is, just some very positive feedback on. Now I have this anxiety of going back to them and completely screwing them up by thinking about them. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And it's something that you've expressed.
Yeah.
I think we've both kind of wrung our hands about this. And I think the only time that really becomes an issue is if we feel like we have to apply some sort of external construct to the work so that we can appear to be smart to people who read it. That's the danger. So it's like, hey, if you're in a story and you're trying to just put your characters in trouble and let them kind of wriggle and writhe and work themselves out of trouble, and you want to express that in a very eloquent or elegant way, where you have people struggling to overcome obstacles, and then they do or they don't. Okay, great. Like that's probably fine. But it's when you take this sort of external, well, I'm going to apply philosophy to this, or I'm going to make a statement about the world in this way that doesn't organically arise from the story. It's something that's sort of plastered or pasted onto the story from the outside. That's where we can screw it up. So I think as long as you're focused on what's happening inside the story and everything is organically coming out of the soil of the story and the plant is growing from the soil that's already in the story, you're good. Like, don't worry about messing it up.
Yeah. And I think that that's one of the nice things about it, is that that anxiety is there, but like we just talked about a couple of minutes ago, where, there are these sort of deadlines. This coming Friday is a deadline for the contest. So it's making me go, all right, I got to get back into this. And I know what others have said about this piece. I know what I feel about this piece. Let me see if I can rework it and retool it. So it just feels like I've been given a real kind of opportunity. Philip Seymour Hoffman once said that auditioning as an actor, you shouldn't dread it because someone has paid for a space for you to go in, and for free, you are acting for 2 to 3 to 5 minutes, and you get to express what you're doing. And while this workshop and a lot of other workshops like it wasn't free, it is a space where you can head in there and just say, here's my junk, here's what I'm doing, here's what my writing is, and get really good feedback on it. And so that anxiety is there because I had that initial spark. You feel like, oh, I'm in it, I'm writing it. And when I already know where I'm going to with it, I know where the ending's coming, and there's the ending, and I see it, and it's right there, and here it is. I did it, And then you share it, and some folks will say, oh, you know what? I think you might need to just tool this, or I got lost here or there. So it's kind of like, wow, I had this really great piece. I was in the zone. And maybe more than thinking about it too much, it's trying to approach it when you're not in the zone. And the thing that I need to overcome now is realizing you are going to be more out of the zone than you will be in the zone. And you have to be comfortable writing in both spaces.
Yeah, I could see that for sure. One thing I've recognized in our discussions over the last however many years is that the writer needs to have a certain amount of distance on the work in order to see it dispassionately and see it for its strengths and its flaws. And so the way that really successful, regularly published authors do this is they put it away and they immediately start working on something else. And the act of working on the other thing kind of wipes out the memory of that flow state or that intentionality when you were in the piece. So you can come back to it a week or a month or a year later and read it as though you didn't write it at all. And you can kind of absorb it the way a reader would. And that's what we were getting at earlier, saying you're only going to fix one thing at a time. Let's say I've wiped the slate clean. I come back to a story. I read it fresh and I'm like, ugh, this is really kind of not great. I should go in and fix this aspect of it. And what I'm saying is you might see more than one thing, but I would say only fix one thing at a time, because otherwise it's overwhelming and it may actually create a circumstance where you don't want to work on the work at all. And it might be worth doing, but you see so many flaws. You're like, screw it. I'll move on to something else. And I think that's a mistake.
Yeah. I had taken one of the pieces that I had written in Smokelong, and it's the piece that I want to submit to one of the contests. And I had printed it out. And this is a trick that I used to do when I was catering. I would print out a piece, a story that was like a one piece of paper story, like a very short, maybe 500 words at most. And I'd keep it in my pocket during the catering event so that at some point, maybe when I had a couple minutes, I could like open it up and just sort of take a casual look at it. And so I did that the other day on Saturday. I think I texted you a picture about this. It was like 9 p.m. And when I tell you that I had a bad day at work, it was the worst day at work. Like there was a ghost in my theater's light board that was just causing us all kinds of troubles. And so one of the things that I'm interested in, I don't really want to explore it too much, is that my brain gets so fried at work that I had been at work since 12 p.m. on Saturday. It was 9 p.m. when I sent you that picture because I had just taken that piece of paper out of my pocket. You know, once the show goes up at my theater, I really don't have anything to do unless the place catches on fire. So I like went to my office. I was like, let me pull this out. My brain was so wiped clean of this piece because of work. I was so stressed because of what was going on at work and trying to deliver what we needed to for our client that I read through my piece and went, oh, wait a minute, that right there. I could put something right there or fix that.
Right.
And so it was kind of interesting to be like, wait a minute. So maybe you don't need to spend a lot of time away from the piece art. Maybe you need to just have an absolutely horrible day at work to wipe your brain clean.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, I don't suggest that. I don't suggest it.
No, I think you're right. You are correct that it isn't a fixed amount of time that governs, you know, how clearly you can come back to a piece or how quickly you can do that.
Yeah.
It's absolutely, you know, your mental focus on something else may just churn that memory right out of your short-term consciousness. And then you can come back to the story and go, oh, geez, did I even write this? Like I kind of remember doing this. No, but what's really exciting about that is experiencing what's good about the story and being proud of yourself, but then also experiencing where it stumbles and saying, okay, but at least I can see that it stumbles. So how do I fix that?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's really good. And using the feedback to help focus on that can be good, but that's also why in previous episodes we've said really take time off between, you know, receiving the feedback and trying to apply the feedback. It's one of the reasons having a larger group of people to provide feedback can actually give you this kind of net positive. If I'm waiting on 6 or 7 people to give me feedback on a story, they're not all going to come in on the same day. So I may have a trickle of feedback over the course of a couple of weeks coming back from these folks. And I can even take that and put it in a folder and set it aside until I'm ready to read it. Or I can read it immediately and it stings or it makes me feel warm inside or whatever it does. But then I can just leave it there and wait to come back to the piece, really allowing my subconscious to kind of stew on that while I work on something else. So all of that is part of the process. In fact, I think in an upcoming episode, Tim, we're probably going to go over the expanded process of writing fiction. Because I sent it to you. I texted.
Oh, the 9 steps?
Yes. Yeah. It used to be 3 and now it's 9.
Well, I definitely read that. And I was thinking that is definitely an episode that we're going to have to get into is talking about those steps.
Yeah. And now that I'm following those steps, I'm getting a lot more done and it's exciting to do. But I think, you know, nobody ever told me the process. When I was in school, they focused on process. They're very fixated on process and it was the right thing to be fixated on. But I don't remember it ever being expressed cleanly or succinctly. It was almost like, well, you will uncover your process as you do your work. And sure, I mean, not everybody's going to approach it the same way, but I do think there is a right way to approach it. And these 9 steps are the way to do it. You know, how long you spend on each one, how quickly you kind of move through them. You know, I'm sure that could vary, but the fact that they exist, we'll do that next time. We'll do it on the next episode.